The morning sky over Seoul glowed red as massive engines roared to life. Kim Dae-ho stood behind the fence at the spaceport, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in his sweaty palm. The letter had arrived 3 days ago. Application denied. Genetic. Heart condition. Unsuitable for colonial expansion around him. Thousands of other rejected people pressed against the barriers. They watched in silence as the lucky ones walked up the ramp into the giant ship called New Dawn. These were the chosen ones, the smart ones, the healthy ones, the rich ones, the perfect ones, who deserved to live among the stars. "Look at them," whispered Park Min-ji, standing next to Dae-ho. She had been Seoul's top food scientist until yesterday. Her crime was being 45 years old. "Too old for the new world," they said. "Walking like kings while we rot here." The Terran Colonial Authority had made their decision clear 6 months ago. Earth was dying. The air was poison. The oceans were rising. The soil was dead. Only 1 billion people could be saved, and they would choose only the best. The rest would stay behind on the dead planet. Dae-ho watched a family climb the ramp. The father wore an expensive suit. Mother carried a small dog in a jeweled carrier. Their twin boys looked bored, playing games on their tablets. Behind them walked Dr. Chen Weiming, the genetic engineer who had personally rejected half the people standing at the fence. "My heart beats fine," Dae-ho muttered, pressing his hand to his chest. "It kept me alive for 32 years. That one. Tiny gene makes me worthless to them." The ship was enormous, as tall as a mountain and twice as wide. It could carry 50,000 people to the stars, along with everything they needed to build a new civilization. This was the 5th ship to leave this month. 2 more would follow next week. Then Earth would be alone. A small girl tugged at her mother's coat near the fence. "Mama, why can't we go on the big ship?" Her mother, Lee Hyzen, picked up the child and held her tight. "Because we're not special enough, baby." "But I am special," the girl said. "You always tell me I'm special." Hysen's eyes filled with tears. She had been a teacher for 15 years. She had taught hundreds of children too. Read and write and dream. But the colonial authorities said teachers were not essential for space colonies. They needed engineers and doctors and soldiers, not people who cared for children. The ship's engines grew louder. White steam shot from vents along its sides. Warning lights flashed red and yellow. A voice echoed from speakers around the spaceport. "Final. Boarding call for New Dawn. All passengers must be aboard in 10 minutes. This is the final boarding call." Dae-ho saw his old friend Jung Min-ho running up the ramp. Min-ho had the same heart condition, but his family had enough money to buy fake medical records. Money could fix any genetic problem, it seemed. Looked back once, and their eyes met through the fence. Min-ho's face went red with shame, but he kept walking. "You're leaving us to die," said an old man behind them. His name was Choi Bun-hoon, and he had built half the buildings in Seoul. "Too old at 68. They take our best years, then throw us away like garbage." The ramp began to rise. The chosen ones were safely inside their metal ark. The engines roared even louder now, shaking the ground under everyone's feet. Some people at the fence started crying, others just stared in angry silence. But not everyone looked sad. Near the front of the crowd, Dae-ho noticed a group of people talking quietly. There was Dr. Kim Sora, the woman who had invented new ways to grow food in bad soil. The authority had rejected her because she refused to leave her disabled sister behind. Next to her stood Park Jun-sik, the engineer who had designed the best water cleaning systems in Asia. His only crime was being born in a poor family. "Look around you," Dr. Kim was saying to the small group. "They left behind the teachers who know how to help people learn. The doctors who care more about healing than money. The engineers who solve real problems instead of just building fancy toys." The ship began to lift off the ground. Slowly at first, then faster and faster, until it was just a bright in the red sky. Soon even that was gone. The spaceport fell quiet except for the sound of wind blowing through empty buildings. Security guards started telling people to go home. There was nothing left to see, but Dae-ho did not move. Neither did the others in Dr. Kim's group. They stood there as the sun set and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. They think, "We're finished," Deho said, his voice carrying in the quiet air. He looked at the faces around him, teachers and doctors and engineers and farmers, old people and young people, people with genetic flaws and people whose only flaw was being poor. "They think leaving us here is the same as killing us," he continued. "They think we'll just lie down and die like good little rejects." He smiled for the first time in days. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just decided to prove the whole universe wrong. Let's show them what the worthless people can do. 50 years had passed since the last ship disappeared into the black sky. Lee Seung-min stood on top of the great tower that rose from the center of Seoul, watching clean rain fall on green forests that stretched to the horizon. He was 73 now, his hair white as snow, but his eyes still burned with the same fire that had kept him alive. When the world was dying, the tower beneath his feet hummed with quiet power. It was one of hundreds spread across the planet, each one breathing life back into the poisoned air. The people who built it had been called worthless rejects. Now, they were the ones who had saved a world. "The air is perfect today," said Choi Haijin, walking up behind him with a tablet in her hands. She was young, born long after the ships had left, but she carried the same determined spirit as the generation that had refused to die. Oxygen. Levels exactly where they should be. The forests are making more clean air than we use. Seung-min smiled as he watched children play in the parks below. Real parks with real trees and real grass, not the fake plastic ones from the old days. The kids ran and laughed without breathing masks. Their parents sat on benches, reading books under the shade of oak trees that the abandoned generation had planted with their own hands. "Hard to believe this used to be a concrete wasteland," Haijin said, following his gaze. "I remember when you couldn't see the sun through the smog," Seung-min replied. "When the rivers ran black and nothing would grow in the soil." The colonial authorities said it was hopeless. Said the damage was too great to fix. But they had been wrong about many things. The abandoned people had discovered that Earth could heal itself if given the chance. They had learned to work with nature instead of fighting it. Cities were rebuilt as gardens. Factories were redesigned to clean the air instead of poisoning it. Farms were created that gave back more than they took. The real breakthrough had come 20 years ago, almost by accident. Dr. Park Yoon-soo had been trying to build a better power generator using old parts from the abandoned spaceships. She had discovered something amazing. Earth's magnetic field, the invisible force that protected the planet from space radiation, could be used in ways no one had ever imagined. "Show me the quantum readings again," Seung-min said. Haijin tapped her tablet and numbers appeared in the air above it, glowing blue and green. The data showed something that would have seemed impossible to the people who had fled to the stars. The abandoned Earth had developed technology that could bend space itself. "The field generators are running at 98% efficiency," she reported. "We can move objects through quantum space with almost no energy cost." The colonial ships never had anything like this. Min nodded. The people who had stayed behind had been forced to become creative. They couldn't waste anything. Every scrap of metal, every drop of water, every breath of air had to be used wisely. That desperate need had led them to discoveries that the comfortable colonists could never make. Below them, the city worked like a living organism. Transport pods moved through the air without making noise or smoke. Buildings grew their own power from the sun and wind. People traveled instantly from one side of the world to the other using the quantum gates that only Earth knew how to build. "Population report came in this morning," Haijin said, scrolling through more data. 500 million people across the planet, all fed, all housed, all healthy. Birth rates are stable. No one goes hungry. It was a miracle that the colonial authority had said was impossible. To many people they had claimed not enough resources. The planet was doomed to starvation and war. But the abandoned people had proven that cooperation worked better than competition. Sharing worked better than hoarding. Love worked better than fear. Sir Haijin said, her voice suddenly tense. "We're getting a signal from the outer system monitors." Seung-min turned to look at her. The outer monitors were satellites they had built to watch the space around Earth. For 50 years, those satellites had seen nothing but empty darkness. What kind of signal? It's a colonial transmission. From one of the generation ships, Sung Min felt his heart skip a beat. After all these years of silence, the people who had abandoned Earth wanted to talk. He thought of his old friend Kim Dae-ho, who had died 5 years ago after spending his life proving that a weak heart could power a strong will. He thought of all the teachers and doctors and engineers who had been called worthless, but had built a paradise from the ashes of a dying world. What does it say? Heejin read from her tablet, her voice careful and controlled. They're asking for help. They say their colonies are failing. They need supplies and technical support. They want to establish trade stations in Earth orbit. Sung Min was quiet for a long time, watching the clean rain fall on the green world below. The people who had called them genetic rejects and left them to die now needed their help. The superior ones were begging the worthless ones for salvation. What should we tell them? Shin asked. Sung Min smiled that same dangerous smile he had worn 50 years ago at the spaceport fence. The smile of someone who remembered every insult, every rejection, every moment of being told they were not good enough. Tell them we'll think about it. President Bae Soo-jin sat in the Great Council chamber, reading the colonial message for the 4th time. The words on the screen made her stomach turn with old anger. Around the long table, Earth's leaders watched her face and waited for her response. Listen to this, she said, her voice steady but cold. To any survivors on Earth, the colonial authority has established successful settlements on 7 worlds. We are prepared to offer advanced technology and medical supplies in exchange for raw materials and labor support. Please respond immediately. To arrange supply agreements, the room fell silent. These were the children and grandchildren of the abandoned people. They had grown up hearing stories of the great betrayal, of families torn apart, of the billion people left behind to die. Now the betrayers wanted to make deals. Director Kang Ho-suk leaned back in his chair and laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. They still think we're primitives, scratching in the dirt. Listen to that language. Raw materials and labor support. They want us to be their slaves. 47 years, added Chief Engineer Park Yoon-woo, her fingers drumming on the table. 47 years of complete silence. Not one message asking if we were alive. Not one word of concern. And now they want to trade with us like we're some backward planet they just discovered. Soo-jin had been born 3 years after the last ship left Earth. Her parents had told her stories of the selection process, of the long lines of hopeful people waiting to be judged. Her grandmother had been a brilliant mathematician, but she had a small scar on her face from a childhood accident. The colonial authority had decided that facial imperfections were unacceptable in their perfect society. What do we know about their colonies? Soo-jin asked. Intelligence Chief Yoo Min-woo activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images appeared showing distant worlds under alien suns. Our deep space sensors have been watching them for 20 years. Their colonies are struggling badly. Food shortages, equipment failures, social unrest. 3 of their settlements have already been abandoned. Images showed the truth that the colonial message tried to hide. Desperate people living in metal boxes on hostile worlds. Crops failing in alien soil. Children growing up pale and sick. Under the wrong kind of sunlight, the genetic paradise had become a genetic prison. They chose their colonists for perfection, you continued. But perfection doesn't help you when your fusion reactor breaks down and nobody knows how to fix it. They took doctors who had never seen real poverty, engineers who had never worked, with limited resources, leaders who had never faced real hardship. Soo-jin nodded. Earth's people had learned to solve problems because they had to. Every day had been a battle for survival. That struggle had made them stronger, smarter, more creative. The comfortable colonists had never learned those lessons. They mentioned 7 successful colonies, noted Agricultural Minister Kim Tae-young. But our sensors show at least 12 settlements that have gone completely dark. No radio signals, no heat signatures, no signs of life. Should we tell them we know? Asked someone from the back of the room. No, Soo-jin said firmly. Let them keep their lies. We'll respond with our own version of the truth. She walked to the quantum communicator at the front of the room. This machine could send messages across the galaxy in hours instead of years. It was technology that Earth had developed while the colonists were still struggling with broken radios and failed computers. "Record this," she told the technician. The room fell completely quiet. Everyone understood that this moment would change everything. This was Earth's first contact with the people who had abandoned them, and every word would matter. To the Terran Colonial Authority, Sujin began, her voice carrying the weight of 50 years of betrayal. "We received your message, requesting trade agreements. We're surprised to hear from you after so many years of silence." She paused, letting the words sink in. In the colonial ships, people who had once judged Earth's population would soon be hearing this message. People who had decided that billions of human beings were not worth saving. You left Earth believing that we were unfit for survival. Took only those you considered genetically and economically superior. You abandoned the rest of us to die on what you called a doomed world. The anger in her voice was controlled, but unmistakable. Around the table, other leaders nodded in approval. This was the voice of the abandoned speaking to their abandoners. We did not die. We survived. We rebuilt. We thrived. Earth is now a garden world with clean air, pure water, and sustainable technology. Our population is healthy, educated, and living in harmony with the natural world. We have developed scientific advances that would amaze you. She let that sink in too. The primitives had surpassed their betters. You once required us to prove our worth to you. You judged us by your standards and found us lacking. Now we will judge you by ours. If you wish to return to Earth, if you wish to trade with Earth, if you wish to be welcomed by Earth, you must prove your worth to us. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone knew they were witnessing history. We will consider your request, but understand this. Earth never forgets. We remember who stood with us in our darkest hour, and we remember who abandoned us. Prove that you deserve a second chance, and perhaps we will give you one. The transmission ended. Sujin looked around the room at faces filled with grim satisfaction. The children of the abandoned had just told their parents' betrayers exactly what they thought of them. "Now we wait," she said, "and see what the superior ones do when they realize they need us more than we need them." Admiral Song Myung stared at the tactical display, her perfect face twisted with confusion and growing fear. The invasion fleet that was supposed to easily conquer a primitive Earth was being torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. Around her on the command bridge, officers who had been bred for genetic superiority struggled to understand how inferior humans were defeating them so completely. "Report." She barked at her tactical officer, Commander Yoon Jae-hook's hands shook as he read from his instruments. "Admiral, we've lost contact with 12 ships in the last 10 minutes. The enemy vessels they're not behaving according to any known physics." Myung had been chosen to lead this mission because her DNA was perfect. Her ancestors had been selected from the best military families for 5 generations. Her reflexes were faster than normal humans. Her intelligence was in the top 1%. Her genetic profile showed no flaws, no weaknesses, no imperfections. None of that mattered. "Now, show me the enemy ships," she ordered. The main screen filled with images that made no sense. Earth's defense vessels looked like they were made from scrap metal and salvaged parts. They were smaller than the colonial warships, uglier and built, with no concern for aesthetic perfection. But they moved through space like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. "They're using some kind of phase technology," reported Science Officer Han Bora, her voice high with panic. "Our weapons pass right through them when they want, but their weapons hit us every time." Myung watched in horror as another of her ships exploded in a ball of fire. The Perfect Dawn, carrying 3,000 of the colony's best genetic specimens, simply vanished from the display. Gone in an instant, destroyed by people who were supposed to be dead 50 years ago? "How many ships have we lost?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be terrible. 37 confirmed destroyed, Admiral. 15 more heavily damaged and unable to fight. The enemy hasn't lost a single vessel. The colonial authority had sent 60 ships to reclaim Earth. They carried the finest weapons that genetic perfection could design, manned by crews whose bloodlines had been purified for generations. They were supposed to sweep aside any primitive resistance and reclaim humanity's birth world for the worthy. Instead, they were being humiliated by the people they had left behind to die. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Lee Dongwoo. "It's from the enemy fleet." "Put it through." The face that appeared on the screen made Myung's blood run cold. It was a man about her age, but his face was scarred and weathered in ways that no colonial citizen would ever allow. His eyes held a hardness that came from real struggle, real loss, real survival. This was what the abandoned children had grown up to become. "Colonial fleet," the man said, his voice calm and controlled. "I am Fleet Commander Lim Woo-jin of the Earth Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to stand down and surrender, or we will disable every remaining ship in your fleet." Myung found her voice. This is Admiral Song Myung of the Terran Colonial Authority. "Earth belongs to humanity, and we represent the best of humanity. You will submit to lawful authority." Woo-jin smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, you represent the people who abandoned humanity when it needed you most. We represent the people who stayed and rebuilt from the ashes you left behind. Your 30 seconds are now 20. "You're bluffing," Myung said, but her voice wavered. "Your technology is impossible. You can't disable an entire fleet." 15 seconds, Admiral. "I suggest you look at your tactical display." Shh. Myung turned to the display and felt her heart stop. Dozens of new contacts had appeared around the colonial fleet. Not ships, but something else. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, made from materials that her sensors couldn't identify. "What are those things?" she whispered. "Quantum mines," Woo-jin replied casually. "Each one can create a localized space-time disruption that will freeze your ships in a temporal loop. Your crews will be alive but unable to move, think, or act until we decide to release them. It's quite humane, really. It's much more merciful than what you plan to do to us." 5 seconds, Admiral. Myung looked around her bridge at officers whose genetic perfection had prepared them for everything except facing people who had been forged by real hardship. Their expensive education had taught them tactics for fighting other perfect people, not survivors who had learned to turn scraps into miracles. "Time's up," Woo-jin said. The quantum mines activated. Myung felt a strange tingling sensation wash over her body, and then everything stopped. She could see and hear, but she couldn't move. Her perfect reflexes meant nothing. Her superior intelligence was trapped in a body that wouldn't respond to her commands. Around her, the bridge crew sat frozen like statues. The tactical display showed the same thing happening to every ship in the fleet. 60 vessels full of humanity's genetic elite, stopped in their tracks by people who had been judged unworthy of survival. Woo-jin's voice came through the speakers one last time. "Welcome back to Earth, Admiral. I hope you've learned something during your time away." "We certainly have." Through the frozen view screen, Myung could see Earth hanging in space like a blue and green jewel. It looked nothing like the dying world her people had abandoned. It looked healthy, vibrant, alive. It's beautiful in ways that genetic perfection could never achieve. She tried to move, tried to speak, tried to do anything. But all she could do was watch as the worthless people came to collect their prize. Former Admiral Song Myung sat in the small white room, staring at her hands. 3 months had passed since the quantum mines had frozen her fleet in space. 3 months since the inferior humans had proven that genetic perfection meant nothing against real intelligence and determination. Her hands, once steady enough to command warships, now shook slightly when she tried to hold a cup of tea. The door opened, and Director Kim Taran entered, carrying a tablet and wearing the same patient smile she brought to every session. Ch was one of the abandoned children. Born 2 years after the last colonial ship had left Earth, she had grown up hearing stories of the great betrayal. But somehow she had chosen to help the very people who had committed it. "Good morning, Myung," Taran said, sitting across from her at the simple wooden table. "How are you feeling today?" "Like a fool," Myung replied honestly. It was the same answer she had given for weeks now, but each time she meant it more deeply. We came here expecting to find primitives living in caves. Instead, we found people who had surpassed us in every way that matters. Taryn activated her tablet and showed Myung images of ships launching from Earth's orbital stations. Sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around them as they prepared for journeys to distant stars. These are our colony ships. We've been sending them out for 20 years now. Myung studied the images with her trained military eye. Ships were beautiful, but not in the way colonial vessels were beautiful. Colonial ships were designed to impress, to show off genetic and technological superiority. These Earth ships were designed to work, to survive, to carry people safely across the vast emptiness between stars. How do you choose who goes? Oh, Myung asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Volunteers only? No genetic testing? No wealth requirements? No social status checks? Taryn swiped to show images of diverse crews preparing for departure. We choose people based on their skills, their character, and their willingness to help build something new. Through the Ringo, Myung could see the rehabilitation center's gardens where former colonial officers worked alongside Earth natives. The colonists who had once commanded fleets now struggled to grow tomatoes and carrots. Their genetic perfection had never prepared them for the simple act of making things grow. Your former tactical officer, Commander Yoon, is doing well in the agricultural program, Tara noted, following her gaze. He's discovered he has a talent for plant breeding. Who would have thought? Young watched Yoon kneeling in the dirt, his expensive uniform replaced by simple work clothes. His hands, once trained to fire weapons that could destroy cities, now gently tended seedlings that would feed families. He looked ... peaceful. More at peace than she had ever seen him during their years in space. What about me? Myung asked. What am I supposed to learn from all this? Taryn turned to a new page on her tablet. Earth's next colony mission launches in 6 months. They're looking for people with Space Command experience to help protect the expedition during the journey. You want me to help you? Yes, we want you. To help humanity, the real humanity, not the artificial version the colonial authority tried to create. Taryn's voice was gentle but firm. Your military knowledge could save lives. Your leadership skills could help build new worlds. But only if you can learn to serve others instead of commanding them. Myung thought about the colonial settlement she had left behind. Ships full of perfect people who couldn't fix their own problems, who couldn't adapt when their careful plans failed, who couldn't work together when things got difficult. They had taken only the best genetics, but had forgotten to take the best of human nature. Why? She asked. Why help us at all? We abandoned you. We left you to die, came back to conquer you. Why not just send us away? Taryn was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the gardens where former enemies worked side by side, because Earth learned something the colonies never did. We learned that abandoning people doesn't make you stronger, it makes you weaker. We learned that real strength comes from helping each other, not from being perfect. She stood up and moved to the window. My grandmother was one of the abandoned. She watched the last ship leave when she was 25 years old. Have spent her life hating the people who left her behind. Instead, she spent it building a better world for her children and grandchildren. She spent it building a world where no one gets left behind, Myung said quietly. Exactly. Taryn smiled. Earth never forgot what it felt like to be abandoned. We won't do that to anyone else, not even those who abandoned us first. Outside, another colony ship was preparing for departure. Myung could see the crew making final preparations, checking systems, saying goodbye to loved ones. Some of them were former colonists like herself. Others were Earth natives whose grandparents had been judged unworthy. All of them working together toward a common goal. The next expedition needs a security chief, Taryn said. Someone who understands both military tactics and the importance of protecting everyone, not just the perfect ones. Myung looked at her shaking hands again. Hands that had once ordered the bombardment of people she considered inferior. Hands that could learn to protect instead of destroy. When do I start training? She asked through the window. Earth's blue sky stretched endlessly above a world that had refused to die. A world that had learned to forgive even those who couldn't forgive themselves.